Hello. Let me pin myself. I look like an 11-year-old boy today, but it's okay. We are comfy. We are here and obviously excited for today's lesson as per usual. So I want to start by, actually, I'm going to finish up today talking about the challenge, the Come Alive challenge. So those of you who are on this, who don't want to be a part of the challenge, we're going to focus on the Zoom first. And then if you still want to be a part of it, you can keep watching and then I'll explain. So first, let's embrace a little bit, all right? So whether you guys have done this with me before, whether you're new, this is a way to physically bring down our cortisol and just connect the mind and the body into not holding on to so much tension that our body feels like it's at the brink of an emergency state. So a little bit of somatic involvement here. What we're going to do first, I'm going to shake out your hands. Shake them out like you washed them and there's no towel. Then you're going to release your shoulders from your ears and you're going to start to just roll them around to loosen them up. Doesn't matter which way you roll them. Okay. Then you're going to roll your neck, your head on your neck. My head does not do a full rotation, but you should if you can. Okay. Then you're going to do 2 face stretches and then an aggressive deep breath. So first stretch is going to be smile as wide as you can and really stretch out the bottom half of your face. So, and release. Okay, and then you're going to do the same with your eyebrows. I have Botox. Mine might not go up as high as you'd think, but raise yours as high up as you can, right? So up we go. Wow, that is impressive. Okay, and release. I swear, at least I don't look surprised. It's just, don't do that. It's okay. So it's the trying to release the tension. I forgot, I was talking to a client the other day and they made a good point. They're like, so then technically does Botox make it so that you release the tension in your forehead? And I'm like, you don't have to sell me on another reason why to love it. Those of you who are asking about the TMJ Botox has made a huge difference. Huge. I used to bite down and you'd see my jaw pop out like like there was like a ball. In the story I put up earlier and the one where I'm turned on the side and my pigtail, I'm like, oh, my hair is growing back. That you can see the ball by my jaw. That's literally my jaw muscle from clenching all the time. It's very common with Hashimoto's to have TMJ or to have a lot of clenching issues or to be like a tongue thruster where you push your tongue against the back of your teeth or like really hard up against the roof of your mouth. That's really common too. If you ever catch yourself forgetting to breathe real quick and just be like, oh, I have to relax. Very common, as well as with anxiety, so, but Hashimoto's, we get the double whammy of the inflammation in the jaw joint. So Botox has been great for that. I don't clench at all. I have to make sure I'm not just sitting there like, because like now I'm not clenching. So I guess now my face doesn't know like what to do. My mouth doesn't know what to do with all that. Anyway, back to today. So today is going to be, I'm going to ask you guys to get really real. All right. So it's going to be really interactive. Last time I wasn't so much reading off of the message of the chat box, but today I am going to be reading from the chat box. So what I'm going to do is I want to go deeper into, before I even explain to you what the hell the topic is, right? I gave you guys no details. I'm going to rattle off a couple of phrases, a couple things. I want you guys to tell me whatever pops into your mind. It can be nonsensical, right? But there's a reason for it, okay? So I'm going to rattle these off as you're listening or after, whatever, type it up in the chat, okay? Leaning in to help. Leaning into what we want to be doing that we haven't been. Leaning into what hurts. Leaning into what holds us back. Leaning into our own resistance to stop the misery. Leaning into what we suck at. What comes up for you guys as you hear this? Reading it here. accepting help, not fighting, please, relief, facing the uncomfortable stuff instead of avoiding or hiding from it, asking for help and accepting that we don't always have control, support. Oh man, that was fast. You're right, it was. Okay, leaning into help, leaning into what we want to be doing that we haven't been, leaning into what hurts, leaning into what holds us back, leaning into our own resistance to stop the misery, leaning into what we suck at. I see someone giving me stress as we speak. Difficult. Yep. Releasing control, accepting what I can control, what I can't, humility. If I only had a brain, accepting that I can't control everything. Between being Italian and being from Jersey, Michelle speaks quickly. That is an understatement. And you throw some ADD in there too, where I'm just like, I just talk fast, but I never mind repeating. So if anybody ever wants me to repeat something, I actually love that, because then I feel like we're really, getting the lesson in. And so don't hesitate to tell me, even if you put it private, public, it doesn't matter. Okay. So thank you, Becky. Now, leaning in to help, haven't been, hurts, hold us back, resist. Oh, you were just type. Look, thank you. I love it. Look for the assist. Yeah. So I get asked all the time as we're talking about this stuff. You guys logically know that, how many times have you had this conversation with me, a therapist, a person who is insightful, like where it kind of is just, ask for help. Don't run away from the feelings. Like, okay, yeah, it's like being told to drink enough water. We know. Okay. But I get asked all the time once we get to these questions, all right, but how do I fix it? Because I don't do those things and I know I should. Or tell me if you guys can relate to this sentiment at all, but like I don't know how to lean in. If I lean in, I'm going to get stuck there. It's going to be too much. It's going to take over. I don't want to create problems that aren't there. I don't want to make things worse. How many times have you guys just been in that thought bubble? You know that all this leaning in stuff makes sense. It's should territory. And I get asked, how do I fix it? How the hell do I fix it? Okay, great. That's awesome, Michelle. You pinpointed it. Now, what do I do to change it? I'm over it. By really taking in what we discussed today and taking the convo further to learn from it. So whatever you guys feel from it, I'm encouraging you, have that, send a group chat to me and your coach. Let's get some dialogue on this for sure. But from practice to baby steps, from talking to us about this, every time we talk about something, it gets better. Every time you practice something, you fail at something, I should have known to do that. And then you do it the next time. All of that is building on itself. That's what the work is. If we were the typical chicken, kale, and quinoa kind of program here, that would be the work, right? Would be, sitting your ass on an elliptical every day. That would be the work. For this kind of stuff, the work is in practicing what we talk about. Just because you hear a Zoom here doesn't mean it's going to be like ding, ding, change everything you do. You might have to listen to the same Zoom a couple times at different points, going through different situations. This is a practice. So before we get into it today, I want you to keep that in mind, that you might have many times during today's conversation, you're like, I know I should be doing that. But I encourage you, go watch the Stop Shoulding Yourself Zoom if you need to. And, know that there's no should here. Okay. Really just take what you can from it. So make sure you're interacting in the chat. First, we're going to go back and I'm going to look at these comments. And then I want you guys to tell me your thoughts on having to lean on someone or something. Because yeah, you should, blah, blah, blah. Do you like it? Why? What does it make you feel like? Do you hate it? Leaning on anything or anyone, that doesn't really come natural usually, or not without a lot of work. Let's go back here. I tend to want to know what I'm leaning into and what the outcome will be when I do. That is a really, really good point. So to know what we're leaning into, that's the scariest part. But I like to use the analogy of, imagine there's a kid who is scared because they're in bed and every night there's this monster that comes to their bedroom. They hear these scratching, awful noises. They see these like big, hands, these shadowy looking hands that come out, and this kid is terrified. But the kid decides one day, okay, enough is enough. I need to sleep. I'm over this shit. I got to see what this monster is. So kid gets up and is like, I'm not afraid of you. And he gets up and he finally sees it's the shadow coming from the window. There's a tree outside. The sound is the branches hitting the window and the side of the house, and everything is explainable. But going into it, he was really going into it, not to see if it was a monster, but to get rid of this monster, only to find that the monster wasn't what he thought. It doesn't entirely make it better because the subject matter is definitely a lot more complicated, but at least, when I'm having to be brave going into something, that's what I try to remember is, okay, it's just about seeing if it's a shadow or a monster. So a lot of times it's a shadow. We'll get into that in a minute as well. Allowing, accepting help, opening my mind, crying, fear, tantrum fit, exhausting. Yeah, we try so hard to tell our emotions how to act, to zip it up and get going until it's so problematic that we can't help but be affected by it. And that's totally the point of today's lesson is, if you got to cry, cry. If you're afraid, be afraid. If you're going to have a fit. But what we do with all of that and how we lean in and learn from that is the big draw here. I don't want to ask for help because I have to bring down my wall. Good point. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. If anyone does relate to that, and Christy, if you want to elaborate as well, what do you think is that wall? Like how does that wall look? How is it when you interact with people? When you don't ask for help, what is that wall that has to come down? Put it there, whatever you're comfortable sharing, anybody. I do not think I can do it or anything. Mom, what in reference to what specifically? If you can elaborate for me. The Zoom reminders help though, because once you hear it, you don't unhear it. It does wiggle its way in there. Yes, it's a seed. Plant that seed, I always say you need these Zooms at least twice. Once to hear it and then once to learn it, where it's you're hearing it again in a situation that applies to you. So it's a very specific lesson at that point, and it just clicks different, but the first time you hear it, it might just open your mind to thinking of things in a different light. And that's really all we need, because then that grows. Makes me feel not independent, needy, so to speak. Okay, so I always like to turn this back around and say, would you be upset if, let's use a partner in this example, because they're usually just the closest ones to us and the ones we tend to have to ask for the most stuff, but really not like to. So if the shoe was on the other foot, would you feel self-conscious that they couldn't ask you for help, or that they wouldn't share their journey? Like if your partner kept it to themselves, wouldn't ask for help, struggled instead of being able to lean on you, even if, they said it's because they felt bad, would you think to yourself and be like, damn, like, why can't they just trust me? Why can't they just let me in? Like, instead I got to deal with all the ramifications of them being sick, when if only I knew how to help. And a lot of partners are not really, like, either they're very confrontational and it's not going to come out like that, or they're not confrontational at all and nothing comes out. And that sets us up for a lapse in communication. So first episode in this series, that would be, I would go re-listen to that in this specific scenario now, because I think that'll click a lot different after today's lesson. So the first C of the series is communication, for that very reason. We're just trying to not be a burden, but the other person's like, no, burden me. I want to support you. I want to help, unless they're not, and that's a whole other story. But I really struggle with hyper independence and used to just doing everything. Relinquishing control is hard for me because I know that I will give 100, but I don't really trust others too. Amazing point. Never expect people to go 100. Never let your motivation to go 100% in for someone else, never let that motivation be because they would do it for you. My mentor told me something, said, never lend anyone money you wouldn't mind being a gift. And that really stuck with me because, that not to say that anyone wouldn't need be in a severe emergency, we're not talking Tindler swindler here, but you know what I mean? Like, just the principle of it all is, if you're going to do something to help, then be in a position to actually help. If you're going to do something to help, that person may never show up in your life again. They may never pay you back that money. If you need that and you're down and out because of it, you can't put the responsibility on that person to do the thing you do for them and return it, because it's just putting you in a vulnerable position, because we can't control other people or actions or how things play out. So I think about it when it comes to the power I give a relationship with someone, or the amount of energy I put behind interacting with someone, is just, I don't do anything that I would need somebody to do exactly like me, because that's just going to be a disappointment. If somebody can get, like, if I do 100 and let's say somebody else does 85%, hey, that's 100% not my problem. So I'm okay with that, right? And it still gets done at the end of the day, and there's still room for improvement. You can look at what that person did, let's say in a work environment, and maybe it's a place for constructive, help. Maybe it's a place to realize you don't want to work there anymore. Maybe it's a place to realize your communication with your staff is off, whatever it is. There's a lot to be learned from going into something and recognizing, what do I see other people, what level would I see them get to potentially, and not feel bad about not having to do 100. Not everyone always does. Not everyone always should. This hustle culture, this grind culture. Let me tell you, people who live to be 100 out in, freaking villages somewhere, they don't have no grind culture, so food for thought. It requires trust and vulnerability. Sure does. I always want to be the one who is helping, not the one who needs help. I think that's important. I always want to be the one that's helping. I would explore why, because this was a tough pill for me to swallow, because I've always loved helping people. And I'm not going to by any means say that that's selfish, but to not think that to a certain degree, it is a little selfish if we feel good helping people. We feel good accomplishing things, but it can't be at the expense of the point of helping itself. That really blew my mind when I thought about that as a concept. If we are so driven to help others because we also need to prove to ourselves that we're worthy and that we're good and stuff like that, then what are we really helping for? It's better to be present for what you do help with and what you do say yes for and things like that, than it is to just do because someone asks. And when you need help, because you put so much power behind that and it means so much to you, you're not just going to ask anybody for everything and anything. It's going to make logical sense. You're going to ask the appropriate people for things. And they won't view it as you being a burden. They'll view it as them giving the support back to you that you give to them. And if they don't, because I know I just said that about the 100 thing, I'm not saying exactly like you do it, but if they don't give a damn about reciprocating, that's not someone you have to waste any energy on. But don't let that be your reason to not get help for yourself. Needing help and being helpless are two different things. I don't like to rely on anyone for fear of being disappointed. Also hate needing people if they don't also need me. Ooh, I like this. Let's define need. If you could define that a little bit more. I don't like to rely on anyone for fear of being disappointed, right? Because what if they don't give a damn as much? But I also hate needing people if they don't also need me. In what ways do you feel you need to be needed? Dive into that a little bit more. Depends on who it is. I need to lean on, sometimes embarrassing / pride issue. Tried to lean on people in the past and been burned from it. Learning to lean on the good people who I can trust in my life now. Yes. So people in your life, the people you support, obviously family is a whole other ballgame, but like, let's say people you choose to have in your life or not, like friends. Friendship, how do I want to say this? You need to be able to lean on the people that you call friends. And it's okay to not lean on them until they get to that level with you. And if they don't ever, then they can be an acquaintance that won't be necessarily who you lean on, right? So that can change. But let people earn that. Let them earn leaning on you. And in doing that, you can lean on them. It's not going to be anybody. because I agree, there are a lot of shitheads out there. There are just a lot of people that how they are. And we have one friend who you'd call in the middle of the night and would sit and talk to you. And you have another friend who's like, I love you, but I really can't function. I'll talk to you in the morning. It doesn't mean they're bad, but you can kind of get a feel for who you can lean on for what in what situation. And it just starts with not being afraid to lean on anyone. Ever notice how we're generally there for everyone and others seem to disappear when we need them? I think a lot of that is that expectation. People who are in your life for who are your blood relatives, we assume that they're going to be there for us the way we want to be there for them. Not always the case. We're just people who happen to be born in a certain place within a certain family. It sucks, but it's not our doing, right? Or friends. If you have friends like that continue to disappoint you and you can't talk to them about it without them making you the bad guy, get that out of here. That is just a waste of energy. That is literally I don't even know of a good analogy. It's just not a good time, and it's not a good time for anybody. So, that theme, a lot of it has to do with what we support and what we tolerate, because people who have a history and do certain things, they might not change. The only thing that can change is how much shit we tolerate. With the crap that happened to me as a child, I learned that one, no one was going to help me, and two, the people that were supposed to help me were some of the abusers. So it's been me for a long time, and that's a hard lesson to unlearn for sure. I'm getting there, but it takes insane practice and loving myself through the fear and vulnerability. Absolutely. So I'm gonna come to the chat here and I'm gonna keep reading, but I want to make sure I get through these notes that I wrote here because it's gonna help with a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing. So first, we're gonna go through stop, drop, and roll, okay? Because there are two major areas when it comes to making peace with leaning. And one area is for assistance in terms of needing help, of needing to know where the bathrooms are at a venue, of needing to take breaks as you're walking somewhere, just needing to lean on whatever method for assistance. And then the other part is analyzing. We're afraid to look at what we did wrong. We're afraid to say, I had that candy bar. I didn't leave my bed yesterday and I didn't text you to tell you that. We're afraid to lean into that. But if you've ever messaged me about something that you feel bad about, I'm never mad at you for it. I'm just like, okay, are we working or are we talking through it? Are you at a place where you want to work on it through action, or do you need to just vent about it? And I think both of these things require stop, drop, and roll. One of my favorites. So I started seeing a somatic therapist, and I was telling her, this is after I, started my business. This is after, I've been at a point of personal growth and everything. So there's a reason shrinks still go to shrinks. It doesn't matter how long you've been a therapist for. It is not easy to put into play what goes on in your own body and your own head. If any of you guys say, I wish I could take my own advice, it's a human thing. It's just all of us. It's why it's like, I think it might be in some states mandatory that therapists stay in regular therapy themselves. So when it comes to going into therapy, I'm not going to lie. I don't know if you guys can relate, but a part of me is always like, okay, let's see what shit I've heard a million times before. Let's hear what I freaking talk about. Let's hear about all the stuff I know. I was so kind of resistant to the idea of even there being a whole lot of area to help with, even for me. And that was just my mindset at the time. This was right when I was starting to have to be I just hired, I think I was on to my second employee. So I hated being a boss. I hated telling people what to do. I hated being upset if things weren't done on time or incorrectly. I hated it. And I was really stressed. This was a whole new area that I really didn't know how to manage. So I did what I do, talked to my mentor about it. He said, go to a somatic therapist, deal with the tension that you hold on your body all day long and really work on this shit. So I did. I went to his somatic therapist, who was absolutely amazing. And she taught me stop, drop, and roll. And I didn't like her our first session because I thought, again, full of myself, I was like, okay, whatever. And I was telling her about this stuff and I was not really diving in deep. It's like our first session, So she goes, all right, I want to teach you something called stop, drop, and roll. And what it is, okay, I want you to stop what you're doing. I'm like, okay, I'm on this call. You can see me. I'm not like, because it was a video chat. I'm like, okay. And she's like, okay, now I want you to drop into what you're feeling. And I'm like, can you elaborate? And she was like, well, I want you to just like actually close your eyes and imagine, where do you feel right now? Where do you feel this whatever you're feeling? And I got annoyed at the question because I was like, what the hell do you mean? Like I feel tight in my brain. Like, she's like, where do you physically feel the tension? And I was like, I guess my chest. And she's like, okay, good. Drop into that. What does that feel like? It's like, it feels tense. It feels tight. Okay. And I started breathing lighter and differently. And she's like, okay, so I want you to stop what you're doing now. Just, stay in your calm place, close your eyes, drop into what you're feeling emotionally and tell me what it is you're feeling. And I was explaining why I was frustrated. And she kept stopping me. And I've done this with you guys. I would give her this elaborate explanation as to why I was feeling what I was feeling. But she'd be like, okay, but I want to know what you're feeling. And I'd be like, I just told you. And she's like, no, you told me why you feel how I should assume you're feeling. But what are the feelings themselves? Explain it to me like you're a child. Use one word to describe them. I'm like, annoyed. And she's like, good. Okay, what else? And I'm like, overwhelmed, frustrated. Like, it's like the floodgates open. I was like, blah, 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 rattling off everything I was feeling. And she's like, good. Okay, now I need you to roll with it. And what I'm gonna do is string it into a phrase for you to use. Just because I feel blank, even though I feel blank, insert feeling here, I can still blank. And a small action, not an affirmation, not some positive shit, not some like, but I can still have a productive day. No, just I can still breathe. I can still stand in front of my computer. I can still go brush my hair. Like, it's just something simple that puts you right into the present. So I was annoyed because I was like, well, which one? And she was like, okay, just go with the breathing. And I'm like, okay. So I'm going to say this phrase. I'm going to say this abracadabra ass phrase. That's going to help everything. And she was like, why are you so mad about it? And I was like, because I've been doing this for a while. And like, I don't understand what some little phrase is going to do for me. I need action steps. I need you to tell me what to fix. Like, I know this whole spiel. I do this. Can we just cut the extra time out? Like, that's my personality. I've been told it's a Capricorn thing. I'm a red personality. It's like, I don't have time. Just tell me what to do. Let's go. So she literally just kept repeating, I need you to stop, drop, and roll. And I'm like, this is what I'm paying $350 for. Okay. I was like, so even though I feel annoyed, I can still breathe. And she was like, does that feel better? And I'm like, yes, it does. And I don't know why. And I was like shook. My brain needs to understand why. I need to get the process behind it. So she explained it to me. She said, when you're resisting how you're feeling and you just want to fix it, you just want your actions, you want to know, how do I not have to go through this? You're not focusing on what it is you're going through, and you're leaving it in your mind, and it becomes a threat. It becomes this bigger thing. And even though you're going through your day and you're doing your work, you clock in, you clock out, you get dinner done, you get to bed at a certain time, right? You're still not doing it feeling well. You're still not doing it at your full potential, because you're still, even though you're telling your brain not to think about something, it's still there. It's still going to be what you're thinking about. It's just now you're thinking about it and doing your other stuff without trying to think about it, if that makes sense. So it makes it a bigger deal. In the stop, drop, and roll video in the classroom, I use the analogy of throwing up. It is the biggest anxiety source for me. So I will try to talk myself out of it, stop myself from throwing up all day. I'll be nauseous and miserable the whole day, instead of just letting myself throw up and feeling better in 10 seconds after 10 seconds of horror and moving on with my day. That's what we do when we stuff down the need for help or how we're feeling, is we're just going through our day nauseous as shit, not any more productive than if we took that time to stop, recalibrate, think about what we're feeling, and literally tell our brains, even though you feel this, you can still do this at the same time and be okay. It's not trying to make it better. It's not trying to get rid of the thing that you're thinking about. It is simply leaning into and making a truce with the fact that today I am going to have to feel this way and go through my day. And I swear to God, people ask me, how did you deal with living through this construction and stuff like that? When I tell you, some days I was coaching myself one step at a time. Even though you feel frustrated, you can still get through your calls. Even though you feel displaced, you can still take a hot shower tonight. And it wasn't my shower, but I digress. Like even though you feel lonely, you can still, I'm trying to think, at that time we had nothing in this house, so what would have been realistic? Even though you feel lonely, you can still talk to Nick. Or my good old standby. If you can't think of anything, breathe. That one, I think, honestly, when I'm the most panicked, helps me the most because it doesn't have to do anything. You can just, even if breathing is involuntary, so for me, sometimes that simplicity of just, even though I feel XYZ, I can breathe. So yeah, I ate my words. I really like stop, drop, and roll technique. And now I teach it to you guys and it helps me get through every day. And at first I was pissed off and annoyed. I was like, this is the work. This is what you want me to do. Okay. And hey, it's wonderful. Okay. And, I'm seeing this stuff. A lot of you guys, these comments, a lot of you guys are relating to each other. Do you guys notice that? Even though you're all from different backgrounds, different situations, different ages, different everything. There's a lot of similarities here I'm seeing. Biggest problem in my crumbling marriage right now is I want to ask and he sees it as needy and doesn't ever ask for help because he big, strong man, more like fucking idiot. Oh man, you're the best. So if you ask for something and he calls you needy, I would call that out. I would say if the shoe were on the other foot and it was health related, I wouldn't think twice, but it's noted. Thank you. And then walk away. No sense. You know why? Because you know all you need to know at that point. And if he incorrectly responded, which happens, maybe he didn't straight out call you needy. Maybe he said something that came across like he was calling, or maybe he did say you're needy. Maybe he'll be like, wow, I'm an asshole. Or maybe not. And there's a reason everything's happening. But either way, you not getting the assistance you need is 100% guaranteed if you don't ask for help. When maybe it'll surprise you. Maybe, he'll see you're not feeling well one day and you ask for something like, you take the trash out or whatever, I'm not feeling well. But hey, this is where we weigh out the life we want. There's a lot that goes into weighing that out. So you don't have to earn your keep. Yes, earn your keep mentality. A lot of us have that. I did, but I do. I have to actively tell myself not to do those things. I don't think it ever leaves you. I just think, because that's the next part I'm going to get to here. Childhood. This was, it doesn't ever just snap out of you. But it becomes a way for you to rationalize it, to say, is this the truth or is this what I believe to be true? Is it a bad place to ask for help? Do I feel like I'm going to get yelled at for asking for help? Like rationalizing between the two gives you more of a place of control in who and how you ask. I always felt needy until I realized that what I need is not big at all. That is huge. That is huge. Watch out for people in your lives who give you breadcrumbs. That is such a massive concept. Don't let somebody powerfully telling you shouldn't be asking for more while they're giving you the bare minimum that you can expect from anybody in that situation. Don't let that be the reason that they don't have to support you. I went to therapy for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but like when I first went to therapy back in the day and I was working through my family trauma initially, I would be talking about my dad who, my dad wasn't the loud one. He wasn't the violent one. He wasn't, so I grew up not thinking of him in the negative light. I really viewed him as the polar opposite of my mom, even though he's extremely narcissist. He's the narcissist, but he was covert about it. It was always about not wanting to disappoint him. He means well. he doesn't know any better. He's, he's a good guy. He just comes across, he's always put a roof over my head. We've never gone hungry, stuff like that. And he's never like, I don't know, beating the shit out of my mom, just like anything I could find that I didn't view anything as bad, even though, it was. And I went to therapy and I was like trying to talk to my therapist about it. And she goes, do you think your dad's a good dad? And I was like, yeah, of course. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I rattled off all those things. I'm like, he's never, he's only hit me before when I was like really, really out of line, when I was a little kid. Meanwhile, that wasn't the case in other adult relationships, so I was like, and well, yeah, I had to take out the loan for my own college, but he pays for some of it. And I feel really bad, and I decided to go to culinary school instead, and all, like, I was just like finding shit to make myself the bad guy and make him great. And she goes, let me ask you a question. Did he have the means to do those things? My parents, my parents made a lot of money growing up. I would want to say I grew up wealthy, but it's not necessarily the case. They made a lot of money growing up, so when she asked me that, I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, even you don't have kids, but if you had kids and you had the means to do those things for your kids, would you have done that? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, that's what parents do. If they can, like, if they can physically support you, it should just be their motive to do so. And that blew my mind, because I'm sitting here saying, well, he didn't leave us, he didn't beat me, he didn't, like, all these things, but it made me not hold him accountable for the things that, I needed to. And I think a lot of that is just conditioning. So growing up, what does that turn into? Earning your keep, not asking for help, not needing help. I'm better if I don't need help. All of that turns from the concept of breadcrumbs. If there's been someone in your life who's made you feel like you should be content with the breadcrumbs, with the bare minimum of what they should be doing in that role, that you'd be doing in that role, then it's a toxic relationship. But we could be on a whole other Zoom about that. So let's see. I've realized lately what I'm needing is bare minimum, and is so disappointing to realize that, but also so good to know. It's powerful when you start realizing, wait a second, what am I actually even asking for here? And, that person doesn't really become so spectacular when you realize, like, they won't even provide the basic functions here. And they can. I had a therapist that didn't have, if I had a therapist that didn't have a therapist, I'd be concerned. Absolutely. Yep. My therapist calls his therapist my grand therapist. I love that. That's so funny. Sometimes it feels like when I would do drugs, like, seriously, it feels like a loss of control. Yeah. So now this is the part where I said before, there's the one area of asking for assistance or giving yourself the assistance, the accommodation. And then there's the other area where we talk about for analyzing. We're afraid to analyze, to lean into analyzing our things we're not great at, what hurts us, what we want to improve. It's like as if we're not naturally good at them, and it just doesn't happen for us. It's like in the doldrums, but any professional athlete, you think they just came out the womb like that? God, I hope not. Oh, but truly, it's a practice. It is a practice. So now, how many of you guys do this? When you do something you don't like you do something and then after the fact, you're like, why did I do that? How many times have you guys said that to yourself? Probably all of us, right? You're not actually asking why. That's just reprimanding. Nobody's asking why. You're not like, let me literally write down. I mean, maybe some of you guys are, but when we're struggling with this, we're not sitting there and be like, why do I think I did this? Well, it could have been this that caused it. And it was maybe I had this happen yesterday. We don't do that. We're just like, oh, why did I do that? We're just yelling at ourselves. And I tie this into, of course, childhood. Now, this won't be the case for everybody, but for a lot of the people who have a hard time leaning, only got reprimanded, like who only got taught what to do when they were getting yelled at for doing it wrong? Like, I use this example and it blows my mind to even think about something so simple. How many times as a kid do you get told, be careful? And that's it. You get told, be careful. You know, let's say you're holding a big branch or something. It's a lot bigger than you. And you're on standing on a wall somewhere. And this just does not look good. You're a little kid with a big ass branch standing on a wall. Like, go get that kid, right? But instead, someone's like, be careful, with no other explanation. So then kid falls down, right? And gets hurt and crying, you know, skinned his knee, whatever. Mom's running over and just like, I told you to be careful. Why do you never listen to me? You're so careless. You're always swinging that stuff around and not looking at yourself. You're going to get hurt one day. It's a pretty common scenario, right? What did that actually teach? That taught, you're unsafe right now. I don't know why. You don't know why, but you better stop what you're doing because it just doesn't seem safe. Then you get hurt. Then you get yelled at because you did it wrong. You got in trouble. How, like, just thinking about that blows my mind because I'm like, holy hell, we've literally been taught that if we don't get it right the first time, like, we're wrong, we're bad. We should just know how to do this. We should just know how to do anything. Otherwise, you know, we're not careful, we're careless. And it's not intentional. Everyone just does the best they can. You know, you have kids running around and they're falling, be careful. You know, what are you going to give a lesson? You're going to stop what you're doing and go by and give a step-by-step tutorial every moment of the day? No, I don't even have kids and I know that's not possible. But when it, just that concept of how we learn from just interactions, it makes you start to think about how many innocent other interactions maybe got in the way of our wiring when we were younger, whether it be on a dramatic extent or whether it be just doing the best we can with what we knew at the time, you know, whatever. We're all in this process of mental health growth. It's not really common for people older than us. So not as much as it's becoming now. So let's talk about, and I want to know your opinions on that, because I love that thought process of explaining and how afraid we are to get involved in things that might not pan out, or how afraid we are to be vulnerable, or to ask for help, to push for what we want, to analyze our mistakes, to learn them. It's so crazy. So tell me your thoughts on that. This part, this came up like 5 or 6 times this week. It's been, I always say, for some reason, like, everyone's issues kind of cluster, I feel like, but parentifying. Who here feels they were parentified at a young age? Meaning you were responsible for someone else's emotions, or you were responsible to make sure that you understood the emotions in the room, so you acted accordingly to avoid them. Or you had to listen to a parent bitch about the other parent, you know, or you had to witness fights, intense fights, witness intense diet talk, and just parentifying, adultifying a child. How many of you guys grew up with other siblings that you had to become the parent of unofficially? You know, or you were never given an option, or your opinions didn't matter, you know, all of those things. So when we're kids, we're supposed to have high levels of oxytocin. And this also, by the way, this goes for anybody who feels like they were neglected too as kids. This is the same kind of concept here. Oxytocin is our love and trust hormone. We're supposed to release a lot of it when we're kids and not a lot of cortisol, because oxytocin, that love and trust hormone, makes us dependent upon adults and our caregivers and stuff that keep us alive as kids. It's a biological response. And then as you get older, you start to manage that cortisol release more, which is tantrums, moodiness, you know, the angsty teen years and all that. So when you're young, this goes for a lot of us, you weren't given that nice, calm, loving, unconditional, secure, safe childhood. You know, not for nothing, you take my abuse and all that shit out of it, I was diagnosed with diabetes at 7 years old, you know, so that grows you up right quick as well, you know. So when you have this, anything that's uncertain, that is stressful, highly traumatic, scary, a big change, lack of structure, all of that stuff, where you become parentified, where you are now put into a responsible role beyond your years, it causes your oxytocin to lower, your love and your trust hormone during your formative years of having that flowing. lowers, and raises cortisol. And that's not even talking about trauma. You introduce trauma and that shit goes screwy. But this is just parentifying or being in that stressful role, right? You're kind of growing up with that imbalance, especially around puberty years. If that's what's happening, it's really, it's really sad, because I see it so often, and it can come across as anecdotal, but I at least know a lot of you guys, have that in you. And I do too. And then I get it. So how do we fix this? Parent ourselves. So parenting ourselves is this exercise is intense. So I don't want you to do this like if you're in the office, or I want you to have some undivided time to be able to do this exercise, maybe where you're able to have some relaxing self-care afterwards, or be able to reach out to your coach or me, the group. I want you guys to, when you're feeling like you're beating yourself up and you're not leaning into what's wrong, what you need to improve, but instead you're just reprimanding yourself, I want you to literally hug yourself, right? It's going to feel weird, but hug yourself. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're in like a room, and it's not that you can't see, like it's all black. There's nothing in the room. It's just you, right? I have to use my hands for that, obviously. So you're in this room by yourself, and then all of a sudden you see a little kid. And I want you to imagine that little kid when they felt the most hurt, alone, scared, whatever comes to mind, whatever age comes to mind. Okay. And I want you to imagine that you're standing in front of you at that age. And I want you to talk to that child like you would if you heard that kid saying all the things you're saying, as you're berating yourself and you're mad at yourself and you're angry at yourself. I want you to imagine that little you is saying those things. Would you be like, yeah, kid, you suck, you're fat? Like, no, you wouldn't be like, you would be like, oh my God, like, no, stop it. However you would coach that little kid who's heartbroken because of something they did wrong. And it's really a lot more powerful than it might sound, and as you're doing it, after you parent yourself and you say, oh, you do your thing, however it feels natural to you. I want you to honestly, I know it feels weird, but just give yourself a little love, a little pat, some kind of comfort. That's another somatic thing. Feeling embraced and feeling the reassurance. It's a real thing. So I want you guys to try this exercise when you feel like you're in a safe place to do it. And if you emerge from this exercise completely distraught, please reach out for support. I don't want anyone to take it lightly. It's some big shit we're unpacking there. And I also want you to, have the support. Stop wasting your own time, basically, to round this out before I finish up the comments here. Stop wasting your own time by either saying I'm fine. Why? Because you're still able to maintain a job and your house hasn't burned down. It's okay to still do those things and not be fine. You wouldn't take a car to a mechanic and be like, I think it's fine, good luck, and leave the keys. You would tell them it's wrong, right? And that's not always easy for us to do, but it's worth exploring. You would want to know what to tell the mechanic when you're bringing it, what's going on. So don't just stuff it down, be like, I'm fine, just because you can walk around nauseous all day stuffing that shit down, right? And don't waste your time just being mad at yourself. I'm not mad at you. Literally, no one's mad at you if you eat a cookie or you stay up till 3 or you drink the caffeinated coffee. Nobody's mad at you. Everybody here just wants you to feel better. And I know you want to feel better. So instead of wasting the time just being like, God damn it, blah, 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 utilize the avenues you have for improvement. So let me go back in these comments then. Oh, I forgot this one thing. Stress causes inflammation. So whether you're stressed because you're trying to be nauseous and get all your shit done by saying, I'm fine, or you're stressed because you are mad at yourself, that's going to affect your hormones negatively, no matter what you're doing. All right, let's get through these comments here. Lots of me here. Yep. I feel like I never got told to be careful, but was told, why would you do that? generational trauma in my family, only telling how on the second try. Absolutely. Only getting screamed at when you get it wrong. Like, what? I realized the same thing with me. I got taught shit, you know? I just got taught when I was incorrect. So, when I'm having bad ADHD day, it feels like I'm speeding my head off. Yeah, it's just manic, right? It's not even productive. It's just pep, you know? Less, why do I do that? And what the fuck is wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. No one person does anything the same. It's this big hoax that there is a perfect way to do anything. It's this big hoax that results are all that matter. The method in which you get those results, who gives a shit? It's your own lived experience. Nobody else has to deal with it, right? So when that happens and you're saying to yourself, like, what the fuck is wrong with me? I encourage you to change that dialogue. Instead, say, what the fuck would I do different? What do I have to stop? What do I have to learn? You can ask questions in those moments. Just make sure that if you're going to ask any questions, they're real questions. It's not just a way to reprimand yourself. Because I used to do that shit all the time. Let's see. Because I said so line, eye roll so hard, my eye roll across the floor. Oh, because I said so. I hate that. I really do. Why can't we explain? Doctors do that shit to us too, right? Like, nothing I teach you guys biologically is stuff that isn't known. It's available. It's common knowledge. It's biology. It's anatomy, you know? But there's such an ego in certain situations with doctors. It's like you're not even allowed to ask why they're thinking that or why they recommend that medication or that procedure or whatever. You know, parents, same thing. Don't be disrespectful. Do as I say, or the best, do as I say, not as I do. Well, why the hell? You know? That used to get a good reaction when I'd be like, that doesn't make sense. But so I wasn't parentified because I was the baby, but I was kind of forgotten because everyone else had more immediate problems. That's huge. That's huge. I mean, not in a way that you were parentified, but you were still unsupported. You still had to kind of go through growing up on your own, because a lot of times people in the baby role are never really respected or regarded as like having their own identity or their own wants or needs or knowing better or anything like that, which is another way that we become afraid to analyze ourselves. I'm 31 and my siblings still come to me before the parents. So that's a lot. I get it. I recently learned that being called an old soul or told that I am so mature for my age all my life is actually a result of trauma and having to skip so many steps to take care of what needed to be taken care of. Absolutely. We weren't allowed to be children. That's really why we are so old for our age, is because we freaking lived a lifetime already, honestly. You know, we're just weathered. So that's really it. Growing up fast. Yeah, yeah, that's not for no reason. Absolutely, that's not for no reason. So let's see. Jamie, I was listening to therapy podcast and they discussed that young adults who were always told that they were very mature for their age are old souls because that they acted like adults when they were younger. It's a result of trauma. Absolutely. Self-imposed perfectionism or parented, having to be taken care of, siblings, etc. We all missed out on the learning experience of childhood. So in our adulthood, we have to relearn steps, how to do things, because we skipped right to adulthood. Absolutely. Socially, I hated being in social settings because I didn't know how to just be normal. I felt like I was too fidgety or I was too uninterested. I wasn't paying attention enough. What's my face doing? What's my mouth look like? You know, all these things. A lot of it, I wasn't allowed to go to people's houses as a kid. What we experience as kids, it carries. And now if you grew up with the white picket fence family, that is possible. You don't have to be like, but I don't have trauma. It's okay. This might not pertain to you, but look for it in other areas. Take from this today, you know, what you can. And maybe there was something at school. Maybe there was literally nothing ever. And now you're faced with an illness that is severely throwing you for a loop. Whatever it is, try to take today's lesson and apply it to your scenario, but no, you're not alone, no matter what your issue is. So let's see. I hated hearing because I said so. Yeah. Ugh. Nails down the chalkboard for me. That's bullshit. That's such a cheap answer. Just tell me why. You know, I was always too loud or talk too fast. Yeah, I remember the first moment that I hated my ADHD. I was kindergarten, and we would take turns where you'd pull like a popsicle stick that had your name on it, like out of a jar. Every day the teacher would pull a popsicle stick out, and when it was your name, you got to like hold the little bear during story time. So cute. It became my turn. Like she finally pulled my name. And I guess I reacted in a very loud, what I guess now is like a stimming kind of way. I didn't know that no one knew that, I guess, in 1995 or whatever. So the teacher was like, "Oh my God, it's a bear. Calm down. Have you never held a toy before?" And like the whole class laughed. Now, granted, this teacher was an asshole. Like my parents had a real problem with her. She just, I guess, didn't like the little girls in the class. It was bizarre, but regardless, it was humiliating. And I realized from that day forward, I had to mask how I was. So then I didn't know how to be in public. I would just be really awkward and like in my own head freaking out about how I was about to interact with people. Got that shit from childhood. I'm a grown woman now. I had to put work into learning how to get around that. But I couldn't help that was the friggin' dialogue that was provided to my young, impressionable brain, So we do what we can. Now I'm like, screw you. I'll get as excited as I want about the goddamn bear. I wish I could meet her. I bet she aged like shit. She was so bad. Right? She was like her name was Pantaleone. Her name was Pants. Miss Pantaleone. She was awful. Some kid like ripped my pants off, right? I swear to you, it like happened, like tore down the back of my pants. And she didn't tell anybody. She didn't call the office. She was like, serves you right. You probably egged them on. So like someone hopefully sued her at some point. I had teachers that told me, what does that have to do with anything? Or told me to move on and make my point. Ugh. Thank God we know more these days. It's still not great, but you know what? It's a long way from what it's been. So I hope that you guys got, a lot from this. And if you didn't, I want to talk about that. Maybe this didn't apply and we can find a different lesson in it. But if it did, let's discuss. Shoot us a text. And, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. I hope that this helped you. And I will see you guys next week for our final lesson in the Calm series. All right. So let me stop the recording.